Now, I can't remember having spoken directly in Asia before. I know I've coached some folks, but I didn't remember if I'd spoken to an audience in Southeast Asia. So I wanted to know, are these terms used in Southeast Asia? So I did some research and I found out that yes, they are. I found that McKinsey has done some research. McKinsey & Company, a very famous consulting firm, international consulting firm, and they wrote a piece about what makes Asia Pacific's Generation Z different. And so they walked through, they used the terms. So I said, okay, I'm safe. I can use those phrases and everybody will know what I mean, correct? Was that right? So, but now their research on this was for consumer research. Right? They want to know, what are the shopping trends? What are folks buying and how are their buying patterns? So I looked at it and A, it confirmed that I could use the terms, but B, I'm looking at the data through the lens of our discussion today. Does it make sense when we're talking about multi-generational coaching? Here's why I think it matters. What they brought up is that by 2025, Generation Z will make up a quarter of Asia Pacific's population. That's Generation Z. Generation Z, however, is not like the millennials. They are entering adulthood during a global pandemic. Now, think about what that means in terms of, they're talking about this in terms of consumer research, but we're thinking about this in terms of coaching. Right? How many of you are raising children who all they've known is the pandemic? I have to put my hand up because I became a father during the pandemic. So up until about a couple of weeks ago, all my daughter has ever seen are folks in masks. Now we've started to kind of relax the rules here at her school. They've actually stopped wearing the mask. So now she's able to see her teacher's face for the first time. She's 14 months, so she's in daycare, but she's able to see her teacher's face for the first time. She's able to see her classmates, I'm not gonna say colleagues, her classmates for the first time. And so we think about just a small difference that makes in terms of a connection, being able to connect to another human being. And remember, we couldn't even touch each other at first, right? So think about what children were deprived of during that time period, the affection, right? And some of our elderly senior citizens, right? I think about moms and grandparents who were denied that affection, which is so important. And what happens when you don't have the ability to see that other person smile back at you, right? So those simple things that we maybe took for granted, they actually affect how people develop. A lot of people will need coaching coming out of the pandemic just because, as someone talked about earlier, I think it was Frank, their emotional skills, it's Rick, their emotional skills are lacking, right? They never develop certain things because of this. The last point that they made is that by 2025, Generation Z and millennials would compose half of APAC's consumers. Well, knowing that half by 2025 will be the composition tells us something as coaches, right? Tells us who the target audience will be, but it also tells us something that we need to be aware of as coaches, all right? Now, what does that translate to? Well, ICF undertook a tremendous research study, the first of its kind in 2020. They commissioned a study that really incorporated not just their research, their audience, but they went to the other major coaching entities around the globe. And they gathered 22,500 responses from coaches, managers, and leaders in over 161 different countries. And what they did is they had PricewaterhouseCoopers, very prestigious, well-known auditing firm, do all this legwork. And that outgrowth of that was this 2020 ICF Global Coaching Study. And what I love about it as a coaching practitioner is it answers some of the questions that we're going to talk about right now. Who is the consumer of coaching? What's the average age of those folks? What's the average age of the folks delivering the coaching? Okay. So one of the things you'll see here is they actually use a similar chart to what I used. They're from CNN. They put this in their report. And they said that with the exception of North America, the majority of coach practitioners are Generation X. Isn't that something? That means most of the time they're coaching people who are senior to them, right? And the majority of the coaches globally, millennials were just 1 in 10 of the coaching practitioners. And then they give you some data about Eastern Europe. Okay. Going a step further, we look at the clients. The typical coaching client is between 35 and 44 years old. That was 37%. Just under 1 in 3 clients were between 45 and 54. And then around 1 in 4 were 35 years old. That's the data that they had at that time. Now that has changed a little bit over the last couple of years, and it's also changed because of a project that has been undertaken that I'm going to share with you in just a moment.